Welcome back to Keeping Ag Real. This is a show which is built on the premise of getting to the facts and realities around food, fiber, fuel, and everyday items that we depend on. I appreciate you downloading this episode. I'm your hostess, Jenny Schweigert. I am a soccer, baseball, 4-H, and FFA mom. I think I fit everything in there. I am also a wife, an agriculture consultant, a lambing apprentice, and dairy cattle enthusiast. This episode is special as it coincides with a collaborative project called Forward Farm. It's a collaboration with a grain farmer, Trey Mills, on his farm, Harborview, along with Bayer Crop Science. At first glance, he sounds like he could be my next-door neighbor or any other Midwestern corn or bean farmer. We touch on row widths, cover crops, debris, glyphosate, and just about everything in between. So why is he so unique? It's the proximity of the farm, major players in agriculture. They are located less than 100 miles from Capitol Hill. They're adjacent to the Chesapeake Bay in beautiful Maryland. Like many of you, he's passionate about making his farm profitable while being an environmentalist. He's also passionate about opening their farm, making visiting convenient to those who are located in D.C. The Forward Farm serves as a way to bring lawmakers to modern production agriculture farm, and it happens that today is the opening event. I really enjoyed this interview with Trey and learning how their farm is serving as conduit between DC and modern agriculture. I suspect many of you will also enjoy the interview as well. Keeping Ag Real is part of the Farm and Rural Ag Network, your one-stop shop for the best agriculture podcasts and vlogs. Visit www.farmruralag.com for more information. Today's episode is sponsored by Bayer Crop Science, providing access to crop protection safety data through their new transparency initiative. So what does this mean? It translates to Bayer sharing the scientific data they're using when evaluating plant protection products, and they want to share that with you. Google the words Bayer and transparency to quickly find the new website and learn how you can love the facts.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Trey Hill. I'm a farmer in Rock Hall, Maryland, and I own and run Harborview Farms with my father, Herman.
Thanks, Trey, for joining us.
Thank you.
So tell me briefly about your farm. You know, is this, you're in Maryland, and for a Midwestern girl, I think of Maryland as being really urban. And, you know, how many generations and what do you grow?
We're a fourth generation farm. It was started by my great grandfather, and then my grandfather and then my father built it out and kind of made it larger scale, and he was more of a businessman to make it grow. And then I've been home for about 20 years, having come out of college. We currently grow corn, wheat, and soybeans. We deal with a lot of small tracts relative to the Midwest. Our equipment is very similar to Midwest. I mean, I'd say our corn and bean production is very comparable to the Midwest. We run Class 8 combines and 12-row corn heads and 40-foot drapers and 60-foot planters.
Now, is that common for Maryland? I was surprised when I read that about you doing research. I don't think of the East Coast as...
Where we live is called the Delmarva Peninsula.
Okay.
So we're directly across the bay from Baltimore City. And the western shore of the Chesapeake Bay is kind of the I-95 corridor. It runs basically from Richmond to Boston. It's pretty much a metropolitan area, that whole route. It goes from one city to the next. Or
I know that from the Weather Channel.
Yeah. So
you hear a lot about that.
So on the other side of the bay, we actually have a really thriving agricultural community. We have a tremendous amount of poultry production. Purdue, who most folks have heard of, they started there. Mount Air is there, and there's a few others that produce chicken. So it's kind of like a locally raised, it's industrial sized, but we consider it growing local as an ag community that we're supplying fresh chicken for a significant portion of the Northeast population. So it's a fresh market. Poultry production, the grain's raised there, the chickens are raised there, they're processed there, and then they go to grocery stores all over the Northeast.
Is that for convenience, or is that because that is what is the demand right now?
I'd say that's what the demand is. We still have dairies. There's a few beef cows, but I would say the chicken industry is the dominant force. They're the ones that consume all of our soybeans and corn. There's a little bit that's exported and a little bit goes here and there, and some goes to the dairies, but that's the bulk of it. So it's still a really good market. It's a fairly rural area relative to Maryland. Depending on where you're from, it's all, everything's relative.
Right,
but
right.
Our average field size is about 40 acres personally.
Okay.
As a whole for the Delmarva, I'd say that's probably about average. So they're not horribly small. We can still run, the larger equipment and stuff. So.
Are we talking rectangle Midwestern tracks, or are we talking?
No, we don't have rectangles or squares. We have triangles. We have
challenges.
Yes, we have everything. We don't have any squares. So no, we don't do that.
That I did expect. You're pretty pro cover. What prompted you to begin growing cover crops? Was there an event or an aha moment which led to this change?
My route into cover crops, I don't know if it's unique, but I don't know too many other folks that have experienced it. We've always liked to no-till, and we've had a state cover crop program for about 20 years. So we've always cover cropped, and we've always liked to no-till. And when we would plant the cover crop, we would seed it. We were allowed to terminate it or kill it with chemicals as of March 1st. So we always thought that the proper thing to do would be to kill it as early as we can, so that the fields would be quote-unquote clean when we went to plant them. That's the way we've always done it. The problem was, in that environment, we couldn't plant as early as we could if we plowed the ground, turned it over, and dried it out. So we would always do a mix of no-till and conventional. Nothing against conventional, but it was costing us more money, but it was so that we could plant that first, second week of April. And the no-till ground, we would typically plant the conventional ground, then by then the no-till ground was fit. We were doing that for quite some time, and then we argue over how long ago it's been. We honestly don't know. We should have written it down, but aha moments, you never know it's an aha moment until like a lot later.
Exactly.
So we didn't really realize it, but we had sprayed a field, killed the cover crop on the headlands, and I don't know if we got rained out or what happened, but anyway, the inside of the field, the outside of the field had a 90-foot pass around it. We were running 90-foot sprayers at the time. The inside of the field became a hot mess. It had grown up in, I think it was wheat, and it was almost headed out, and it was right on the road. It was right next to the local mill. It was right next to the local fertilizer dealer, so it was quite embarrassing because we had this 90-foot pass around the field, and the rest of it was green, and the neighbors were talking, and we were talking, and so we were going to plant it, and it was still too wet. But we were at the point of no return. If we disked it, we were going to have to wait for the root balls of the wheat to break down before we could hit it again to get it knocked down. So we were going to have a mess there. If we killed it and tried to plant through it, we were going to have issues with the trash whippers tangling it up, with the stuff pulling out of the ground. Once the top dies and the roots don't die, then you can't run a trash whipper through it. And then we like trash whippers. We don't like to plant without them. So it's like, oh no, what are we going to do? So George Wilson, who works with me, he kind of helped raise me. He's been with us probably 35 years. And we argue that he might have planted more corn than anyone else in the world because he's been doing it forever, so, with a lot of acres. Anyway, he went out to plant it, and I was on the other planter. And he said, "Trey, you need to come look at this." And usually that's not a good sign, right? Somebody calls you, it's always something wrong. And I was like, oh no, we got a mess, and start thinking how we going to, I guess we'll spray it with Gramoxone, then we'll disc it, then we'll plow it, then we'll disc it again, and we'll just kind of hope for the best.
But it wasn't what you expected, was it?
No, he said, Trey, come look at this. And we looked at the headlands where we had sprayed it around, and we were getting sidewall smearing. We were having trouble closing the trench. The slot was still open, clearly just too wet to plant. He's getting mud on the gauge wheels, mud on the closing wheels. And then as soon as you went within 4 inches of the green stuff, it was planting beautifully. So we said, well, we'll try it. We'll plant it. And George said, well, we did some of this stuff with your father years ago where we had taken land that had been grazed or whatever. I don't know what the circumstances were. And he said, we grew great corn. And I said, well, so we decided collectively to try it. And there was no yield difference. I think it yielded a little better where it planted green because the planter worked better. So after that was kind of why we started keeping the cover crops green. It was not soil health. It had nothing to do with water infiltration or aggregate stability. This was before I'd even heard any of these words. It was simply that we could plant earlier, grow the same corn, plant at the same time as the conventional guys. So now the last 3 years, we've actually planted corn earlier than we've ever planted. Our typical early plant date's about April 10th. And I think by crop insurance for replant purposes, I think it's April 4th or 5th. And the last 2 years, we planted corn the end of March. and made out fine. We've done some things managerially to kind of adapt to that by spraying it later, using atrazine and glyphosate mix so that it doesn't kill it very quickly, so that the corn's actually up before the cover crop dies. It survived frost. It looks like a mess, but we've grown some really good yields doing it. So it's kind of let us know that it's allowed us to go to all no-till and still achieve equal yields or on par yields with our conventional fields, and also get our grain in early, get our fields planted in a timely manner, which they say if you're a super type A personality, you shouldn't be a no-tiller. Well, we've had to adapt. Dad and I are both type A. The guys that work with us are all type A. We all like to work. We enjoy working, and if people are out in the fields working, we want to work. So if you don't till, what do you do? So we decided we'll just plant.
Right.
And so far it's worked out well. The beans, we're experiencing the same things everybody in the country. Plant early beans early. We start planting beans the same day we start planting corn. We've been doing that for about 10 years. And like I said, planting green with beans is pretty easy. And we've sprayed out strips, done test plots. And we've shown ourselves that we can grow better beans planted into a tall, ugly cover crop as long as you can stomach it. Will out yield where we're planting brown.
Interesting. I don't know. My father-in-law is definitely type A, and I don't know that he would be able to watch that because it's not clean. It's not.
If I showed you pictures, it does. It grabs your breath at times. We had a story's not meant to insult anyone, but we had our local seed guy, and he's the guy that I buy seed from. He's kind of like me. He's a little bit eclectic, and more so than me even. He's an artist and stuff. He's really a cool guy, super smart. And he and I have we talk about this quite often. He's one of my sounding boards. And his boss came in. He was a Iowa guy, conventionally tilled, Iowa farm family and all that. And he had a sit down with the gentleman that sells to me about how I needed to be talked to because why was I planting corn in March? He wasn't doing it to be mean. He was just like, we got to worry, I'm worried about Trey. And, so it's definitely a little different. You plant corn and you might not see it for a month. The days of driving by and scouting are done. I mean, we've gone from basically 0 scouts in conventionally tilled brown fields to now having full-time scouts that are scouring. We're just walking and walking
constantly.
And walking. Yeah, but it's not bad. It's offset by the savings we're making in tillage and hopefully higher yields. But it's worked well. But yes, it is tough to take. My father was probably similar to your father. I mean, very, very proper. I mean, everything had to be done just right. And now he runs a planter in, 6 foot tall rapeseed cereal rye mixes. It's not because of soil health. It's not because of, that's not his thing. He's an old school farmer. It's because we're growing better crops.
Right. And I think everybody's situation is different. And I understand that you're actually being paid to grow cover crops. How does that work? Is that something that's happening in Maryland? Or is that federal?
Well, there's both. We participate in both. EQIP has a program where you can cover crop for 2 years. So the state of Maryland has its own cover crop program, which has flourished for probably 15 years. It's had some hiccups along the way, but it's fully funded. So yes, we get paid to plant cover crops, and then they have all types of different dates and things in there and different mixes. You're only allowed to seed certain things, and we were limited in that we couldn't seed mixes before. It had to be just straight cereal because cereal is the best way to pull nutrients out of the soil. And we learned that if you left them green without something else in the mix, you can suffer a yield loss, particularly in corn. So to do some of our experimentation, we do some out of pocket, but we also do some through the EQIP program, which allows you to do the 10 and 15 weight mixes and things like that, so we can kind of learn to get a little more advanced. And the state of Maryland has come around. They're letting us add some clover, add some radish, add some daikons, add some rapeseed. So kind of our go-to is like a cereal clover rapeseed mix.
Turnips?
I haven't done much with turnips. I think some guys are, but I just haven't. We just source seed wherever we can the most economically.
Right.
So if I can buy a truckload of clover, then I buy a truckload of clover. And then we'll spend a little bit more money on the mixes, but we try to come up with like a standard mix that's inexpensive. The cereal rye we buy from a grower in Pennsylvania that cleans it and certifies it, but it's, the barley we grow ourselves. We're going with our same nitrogen recommendations, even though we're planting green. And we're trying to figure out, so far we haven't really found where we've had an overabundance of nitrogen. The only thing that we've truly discovered is in some cases where we had high carbon to nitrogen ratios or too much cereal rye, we've suffered a yield drag in corn. So that really is a reality to planting green, is that it can adversely affect corn production. So that's the one big thing that we're trying to figure out. That's why we're adding clover, lowering our rates of cereal, crimping over 12 inches, trying to adapt this. But even last year, we still had 2 or 3 fields that suffered a yield drag because of the way we were planting it. So those are the things that there are opportunities to learn. They haven't been super expensive. It didn't cause like it wasn't a disaster. I mean, it wasn't 100 bushels to the acre, but you could tell. The one field, for example, had chicken litter on it, where we'd put the chicken litter compared to commercial fertilizer yielded much better. And I think it was pretty indicative of the fact that the chicken litter was slow releasing nitrogen through the season.
And how does that work? So is it you just take it from those poultry producers, or do you have to buy it from the poultry producers?
We have to buy it. It's a pretty
commodity.
Yeah, it is. To have someone dump it in my field, it's about $23 to $25 a ton. If I go pick it up off the farm, typically we're paying 10 to 15, depending on the time of year. Spring, it's usually worth a little more than it is in the summer and winter. We're not allowed to spread any in the winter or the fall. So all of our chicken litter goes on in the spring after March 1st. So the areas to store it and stockpiling and stuff kind of drive the market. But we struggle to find it. We're in a really high concentrated chicken area, but it's still hard to find litter. There's a lot of guys using it. And I think in terms of soil health and stuff, it really helps.
So it's really a very environmentally conscious area that you are working in.
Yeah, I mean, we've been required to have nutrient management plans by the state, I think, since 2002. So we have to have a certified nutrient management planner, soil test, and write us a plan with fertilizer recommendations every year.
But they're not requiring imagery or...
No, there's no precision ag component to it as of yet. We're trying to figure that out. Some of the folks that are selling like variable rate nitrogen are trying to figure out how to navigate this, where if the soil actually calls for more nitrogen than the state allows, can we get an allowance for that? But as of right now, no, it's just based on standard zone sampling, and then they come up with a recommendation based on what our fertility is and what our yield goals are. We can't apply any fertilizer before March 1st. Strongly encouraged, and pretty much everybody does dual applications of nitrogen. We side dress everything, but we always have. If I can do it on average field sizes of 40 acres, then anybody can do it. It's not unsurmountable. It's not that difficult. It's just a matter of figuring out how to do it and get equipped to do it. So yeah, we don't have no fall applied, no winter applied, everything after March 1st. And we've been doing that for quite some time. It's not that bad. It might be March 15th. I know we can start March 1st, top dress. And the nutrient management plans aren't bad. They're based on relatively sound science. It's based on our own personal yields. You know, if you pick a farm up and it doesn't have a very good yield goal established, you know, sometimes you run into some, a little bit of a quandary there. But for the most part, it's not too bad.
So I want to shift gears. We're going to talk a little bit about how you are becoming a forward farm with Bayer Crop Science. But as we were chatting earlier, we were talking a little bit about the differences. We are out here in the West Coast right now, and we're talking about water and immigration, and you had brought up the immigration issues that you face out on the East Coast. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know people in the Midwest, it's not something that's necessarily on our radar as much as it is for people in the West. And so it kind of, I think at times, especially for the general public, it just kind of is a problem or a challenge that isn't out there.
Yeah, well, I think as a grain producer, we don't use much immigrant labor. Because everything's so high tech now, we've actually found that we need more highly qualified, highly skilled people than we ever did. It's kind of the antithesis. You thought if the tractor steered itself, then you could replace them with lower paid people, but now we actually need higher paid people so we're quite fortunate to have a really good team at this point. But I know that there's a lot of moving parts within my industry that facilitate me being able to grow corn and sell it locally. We have the poultry industry, for example, the processing plants, the feed mills. A lot of those rely on immigrant labor, and I don't think that they're necessarily displacing jobs. They're taking jobs that people pretty much don't want. There's not much glorious about working in a chicken processing facility.
Sure.
So I don't think there's been a huge impact as of yet, but I think that there seems to be an overall feel that a lot of the folks that go home for the winter are choosing not to come back. So I think that I need a thriving chicken industry, just like, in fact, a lot of the guys in the Midwest who ship their corn to the Delmarva indirectly, via rail and stuff, need it as well. We need a thriving hog industry. We need a thriving dairy industry. And I don't think we want to farm it out to other countries to grow our poultry. I'd rather see it grown domestically, because I think that supports the local economy and supports us as agriculturalists as a whole, whether it's Bayer, trickling all the way down to me as the grower. We all need that animal production, and we all need it to thrive.
Every action has a reaction.
Yeah, so I think we all need the proper amount of help, and we need good qualified help. I think on top of immigration, we don't have enough kids graduating from school with a desire to work in agriculture, whereas I think there's awesome opportunities, but I don't know that we're necessarily teaching it in our schools. I think the East Coast may see it more so than the Midwest, but guys don't get out of high school and go, wow, I want to go work on a farm.
Right.
I think a lot of times we tend to have to try to pick up the leftovers, or really we've done targeted recruitment to try and find folks. We don't have a lot of folks that work for us, but it's hard to find really good people, and I don't think that our educational system is enabling kids to realize that there's some really good opportunities in ag.
And the political scene is really making an impact on the immigration availability for you. And you are really pretty closely tied with Washington and what's going on in the political scene. And we'll be starting the first U.S. forward farm. I was actually able to go to one of the forward farms that's over in Germany. Can you tell us a little bit about that forward farm and what the intention is and the connection to D.C.?
Yeah, I've had, over the years, we've become just trying to advocate for what we do. And by doing so, we've joined a lot of environmental organizations, and we've become environmentalists, and we've kind of changed the way we're doing things and the way we speak about things. And in doing so, we've also had a lot of people come visit our farm. I think I've had people from over 45 countries come to my farm. It seems like no matter who it is, they really enjoy visiting a farm, whether it's my farm or anyone's farm. I think Bayer's kind of learned through their European base and by having these forward farms in Europe that there are a number of people that want to come see a farm. There's lots of people that work in D.C. that have never been on a farm, or they've never been on a large farm. Not that size is pertinent, but a full-scale, full-time crop farmer. Yet most of the laws and regulations are directed at the large-scale corn and soybean growers, because that's the predominant amount of acres in the U.S. So I think it's a real neat opportunity to get folks out and have them come meet a farm or me, and we'll have other farmers involved. We're going to have local folks from Farm Bureau and corn growers. Nick from the corn growers are doing their soil health partnership with us. I mean, there's a whole bunch of moving pieces in this, but so that people can come out, whether it's an NGO, politician that's working on policy, and just kind of see why we do what we do. If they're talking about, in Europe right now, the big conversation is banning glyphosate.
Right.
So I met a gentleman at the Forward Farm in Germany. Klaus hosted me in Germany. We went and talked to him, and he and I were talking about planting green and cover crops. And he was all excited. He'd never no-tilled before because they moldboard plow everything, which shocked me. But he was like, wow, I'm going to try planting green no-till. And we were, he didn't speak English and I didn't speak German, but we were sharing pictures on phones. And we went out to the field and we were digging roots. And then he looks at me and he goes, well, how do you kill it? And I said, we use paraquat or glyphosate. And he goes, I won't have either of those. He goes, well, what would you do if you didn't have those? And I said, I wouldn't plant green. I'd moldboard plow like you do. So I think those conversations need to be had as to why we need certain things or why we don't need certain things. I think
and how our governments are and regulations are handling all of that.
Yeah, but to me, the healthiest soil and the healthiest farm right now, based on what I know, is to have cover crops growing, if you can pull it off, and plant green or plant close to green and get the cover crop seeded right after your crop. But you need chemicals to do that. As opposed to, not to say anything ill of organic, I think they're a great complement to what I do, and I may convert some to organic, not in the not so distant future. But a field that gets plowed, moldboard plowed and then, cultivated and rotary hoed is not going to have as healthy a soil as I might using green planting and glyphosate or paraquat. So I think that those conversations, as they start to listen to different folks, and you have, this anti-glyphosate group, and then you have the pro-farm group, and I think everyone gets confused because the grower's not actually saying, this is why we do it.
Right.
Or this is where we're not actually using more chemicals because we have glyphosate. Or I'm not killing my wheat with glyphosate and getting wheat on the kernels. That's a fairly small amount of acres that's actually being done on. It does not happen in Maryland at all. a lot of these things get misconstrued. They get picked up by the media. They get blown up, and something that might be isolated or a very small percentage of what's actually going on ends up being what makes the policy. Whereas I think with Forward Farm and getting these folks out on a farm that's...
You're the conduit.
Yeah, relatively. I'd say I'm moderately typical. No one's typical. Everyone's different. But in terms of the equipment and the money and, the amount of risk and the family drama and, all the different
family
things.
Drama.
Yeah, no one has that. But, but we have all those things in the mix, yes. Even though we're in Maryland. If you were Midwestern, you'd say, even though he's in Maryland. But, no, it's really very common. So I think that those are good things to talk about. I think that talking about family drama is important as we progress and figure out how to do next generation stuff. And I think the policymakers need to know that, hey, maybe I didn't adopt cover crops that quick because Dad wouldn't let me. Mm-hmm. We're equal partners in this. He built a business. I need to respect him even if I don't agree with him.
I want to write a book one day. I don't think people would believe some of the stories.
Yeah, so we have some of these great young farmers that want to cover crop and no-till, and their dad says, no, well, you just have to wait. I mean, you don't really have a choice. So if someone implements a policy that says you're required to do X, Y, Z, and you've got the son there that's fighting with his father, I mean, my father and I mean, it took me a long time to get the messes we plant into now are crazy that he runs the planter on, but it took a lot of doing. I mean, my whole team's on board, but it's, I think those stories are important, and I think as people come to the farm, discussing that, why do we use neonic seed treatments? Well, because we used to use Furidan. Furidan was really, everyone has a story of someone that went to the hospital because their coworker fell out putting Furidan in the planter and the wind was blowing the wrong way. So we're really excited to have neonics.
Right.
And, if there's an issue with pollinators, then let's fix it. Let's get Fluency Max on the planters, not have it blow out if that's what it is, or let's figure out how to get it in the fur.
And explain that it's a tool to improve your environmentalism.
Right, and we're not carpet bombing. We're not, maybe we can pull the pyrethroids off the top. And so I think there's some really good stories out there that are very misunderstood unless you actually talk to the grower and say, hey.
And you're going to serve that purpose by getting those stories out there to people in D.C. I just commend you for jumping into this feet forward and with your Forward Farm. Is there a place that people can go and contact you if they want more information about the farm on social media?
I'm not a big social media person. We have a Facebook page, but all I really do is post stuff. We do a philanthropy for providing chicken to a food pantry and stuff. So we try to just keep it positive and green.
But they could message you on Facebook.
Yeah, or our website. We have a direct link on our contact list on harborviewfarms.net.
Very good. Well, thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you for joining this episode of Keeping Ag Real, and thank you to Bayer Crop Science for sponsoring this episode. Please go to www.keepingagreal.com for more information on other podcasts and blog posts. You can also follow me on Twitter at Jen Schweigert, as well as at Keeping Ag Real, and jump over to Facebook and search for Keeping Ag Real so we can get connected. Thanks a lot for listening.